The mystique of going to Russia, not to mention Mongolia and Siberia on a train, had a uniqueness to it that I just couldn't pass up.
The Trans-Siberian Express is the most famous, well-known, probably, train journey in the world.
This is your wake-up call in the metropolitan city of Moscow. The Volga, celebrated as the national river of Russia, flows down the middle of the country and right through the capital Moscow, where it's here called the Moskva River. At one side of the river, you'll find a bustling modern high-rise business district. On the other, more traditional neighborhoods, like the Izmailovsky Flea Market.
The flea market for me was a highlight of my pre-train touring. I got out there very early in the morning and had a chance to spend most of the day out there. I met some lovely warm Muscovites. I saw some fantastic souvenirs, and it's also a way of delving into the modern lifestyle of Muscovites. I mean, there's heritage on the table, but there's modernity everywhere else.
Here you can hear nostalgic music played on gramophones hardly seen anymore. Every Sunday you can find vintage clothing, antiques, and other precious curiosities from centuries past. Visitors will discover an amazing collection of the past. Visiting a Moscow flea market is a bit like a lottery. You never know what kind of treasure you will find. From the medieval citadel atmosphere to the Kremlin district, a perfect place to begin a tour of Moscow on your own. Right behind the Red Square and the Kremlin is one of the main shopping streets, where a shopping spree is usually accompanied by excellent street musicians. Russia's most famous shopping mall, the State Department Store GUM, or as it's known by the Russians, GUM. Since the fall of communism, several other shopping centers and hypermarkets have sprung up to rival it in prestige, but GUM retains its status as a consumer mecca for visitors to Moscow. Tonight, a welcoming dinner at the Ritz-Carlton. Though completed in 2007, the 19th century styling looks quite authentic with an old world style and feel. On the eve of our departure, the Golden Eagle team welcomes you in the Moscow room. Here we'll be briefed on all the details of our upcoming Trans-Siberian Express train journey. Meet your fellow passengers from all over the world and share your passion for exclusive train traveling. Today at the railway depot, the Golden Eagle Trans-Siberian train is being prepared and serviced by our maintenance crew and staff before boarding at the KAZAN station. This morning, we'll begin with a Freedom of Choice tour, seeing the highlights of Moscow. The Bolshoi Theater in the historic heart of Moscow near the Red Square. The Bolshoi Ballet and Opera are among the oldest and most renowned in the world. The Monashnaya Square near the Kremlin is a large pedestrian area in the heart of the city. Centered by the glass dome of the four-story underground shopping mall, it's a fascinating place to go for a stroll or a photo stop. Alongside the exhibition center are the Russian horse fountains created by the famous sculptor Zurab Tsereteli. At the Monashnaya Square, you'll also find the recently unveiled monument to Prince Vladimir. Its enormous size makes it unmissable as you head towards the Cathedral of Christ the Savior. The cathedral has had a short but turbulent history. It was originally commissioned after the defeat of Napoleon, but work did not begin on its construction until 1839. Moscow has a wealth of museums showcasing world-famous collections, as for example, the Museum of Fine Arts.
A few days ago in Moscow we did a tour of the National Museum there in the gallery, and it was astounding, the paintings that were produced by Russian painters. Absolutely fantastic.
There's hardly a better way to absorb Moscow's atmosphere than on a ship sailing up and down the Moskva River. The Peter the Great statue can't be overlooked. The Pushkin statue leads us to the famous Café Pushkin. This aristocratic restaurant is popular with local businessmen as well as passing tourists. Diplomats, bankers, and Moscow's rich and famous now frequent it. But at one time not so long ago, it was known as the only restaurant in town where you could eat European food and talk freely. The current Russian and French cuisine recalls Tsarist times. The famous Moscow metro stations, also known to locals as the People's Palaces. And indeed, your first encounter with the Moscow metro stations will surprise you. Never has a subway system seemed more appealing. With over 180 metro stations in Moscow, and even more planned for the future, the Moscow Metro is one of the most heavily used systems in the world, moving more than 9 million people per day. Every 40 seconds, a train arrives or departs. Before a visit to the Kremlin grounds and cathedrals, the spiritual, historical, and political heart of Moscow, we'll take a walk on the Red Square and visit the St. Basil's Cathedral. This is the famous statue of Minin and Pozarsky, leaders of the militia that repelled the Polish invasion of 1612. Ivan the Terrible commissioned the building of St. Basil's Cathedral in order to mark the capture of Kazan from Mongol forces in 1552. It was completed 8 years later. The Kremlin has played a dominant role in Russian life for over 800 years. The word Kremlin itself means city fortress. Today, the Kremlin remains as alluring and enigmatic as ever. 2/3 of it are closed to visitors, but the remaining third contain plenty of sights to behold. The Armory Chamber, where the treasures of the Tsars are exhibited. Not only is this one of the largest and most interesting museums in the world, but it's also the official residence of the President of the Russian Federation. The largest and oldest cannon in the world has earned the proud name of Tsar Cannon. Moscow at night has spectacular vistas and viewpoints. Another city that never sleeps. Boarding time in style on Russia's premier train running on the world's most famous railway route, the Trans-Siberian Express. Undoubtedly among the world's greatest railway journeys, the Trans-Siberian Railway runs like a steel ribbon across enormous, mysterious Russia, connecting east and west from Moscow over the Urals, across magnificent endless steppes, and alongside the shore of the world's largest freshwater lake. All aboard! The first stretch is hauled by a steam locomotive. enjoy your suite as we slowly thread our way through the suburbs and leave Moscow behind us. The next morning, we're already traveling across Tatarstan, a legendary province of Russia, now located in the Volga Federal District, on our way to the city of Kazan.
The Trans-Siberian Express is the icon of rail travel. It should be at the top of everyone's bucket list. Visiting cities that were previously closed to foreigners, I think, is a personal thrill. Seeing the transition from communism to capitalism across the landscape. The Trans-Siberian Express is a must-do for anyone who loves nature, culture, history, or slow travel, because I think there's a huge renaissance for slow travel.
I'm here on a familiarization trip to get more familiar with train travel in general and the brand Golden Eagle, the destination. You could relate it to a cruise, being able to unpack one time and yet be in fascinating different cities throughout. But I'd actually find it much more fascinating than a cruise. Getting to daydream out the window, watching the scenery go by, which changes from birch trees to wildflowers to local communities. The Trans-Siberian Express adds a historical element. So in a way, you're traveling amongst a museum for the Siberian Railway.
Russia's 20th century engineering projects have dazzled the world, and perhaps the most remarkable of these is the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Running 6,000 miles across Asia to the Pacific, it was the most expensive, difficult to build, and longest railroad ever constructed. Every mile built by hand. Its capital city, Kazan, is one of Russia's largest and most prosperous centers, even branding itself as the third capital of Russia. The Kazan Kremlin is a World Heritage Site. Inside this former Tatar fortress with its gleaming white walls, you'll find a tranquil hideaway of temples and museums. The Kul Sharif Mosque, completed in 2005, serves as both a museum and a working mosque. Visitors can enjoy the fascinating story of Tatar Islam, as well as immerse themselves in modern-day Islamic culture. The central government of the Republic of Tatarstan is also located right here. The 59-meter-high, leaning Suyumbike Tower tells about the romantic story of Princess Suyumbike and Ivan the Terrible. The Kazan Kremlin also offers spectacular vistas of both Kazan's historic center and the ever-present and enormous Volga River. Downtown Kazan, a popular promenade and the pedestrian walkway, leads to modern and historically renovated buildings and houses. Our train wends its way across the southern part of the Ural Mountains, approaching the border between Europe and Asia. While the staff is preparing breakfast, the Golden Eagle arrives in YEKATERINBURG. Within the comfort of your own suite, room service is an excellent option. Yekaterinburg is one of the major cities in the central part of Russia. Russia's fifth largest city, it's situated on the eastern side of the Ural mountain range, and is the main industrial and cultural center of the Ural Federal District. Built at the beginning of the 21st century, the Church of All Saints is the Russian Orthodox Church built on the site of the Ipatiev House, where the former Emperor Nicholas II of Russia and several members of his family and household were executed. The church, commemorating Romanov's sainthood, is closely connected to the Ipatiev Monastery in Kostroma, where the Romanovs ascended to the Russian throne. A visit to the obelisk, marking the geographical border of Europe and Asia, is a great place to have a picture taken, with one foot in Asia and the other in Europe. The Museum of Military Machinery, housing an awe-inspiring collection of military hardware. Tanks, aircraft, even armored trains. Aboard the train as we continue the journey to our next destination, Novosibirsk.
I think train travel and being immersed in that destination naturally brings out the writer inside of everyone. It taps into our creative seams. I find myself jotting down notes all day about things that I've seen. Contradictions to my preconceptions. Just watching the colors of the day transition, I think you really can be quite creative spending time on a train, and I'm not surprised that many authors and poets have found inspiration on trains.
I think if you talk about Russia and trains, the first thing that comes to people's minds is a Trans-Siberian. And it really gives you a chance to see real Russia. A lot of people come to see just Moscow, St. Petersburg, even doing a cruise between Moscow and St. Petersburg, and still you only see a little bit of Russia, just a tiny little bit. Going on the Trans-Siberian, you see more Russia than most of the Russians have ever seen.
Dinner in the dining car is a daily culinary feast. Your moment to share the day's highlights. On our way to Novosibirsk, the train stops in Barabinsk. A chance to step off board for a stroll on the platform, or maybe a furry souvenir might be interesting.
I'm on the train as the onboard lecturer, so my job is to lecture the passengers on the history of the area through which we pass. Well, I've been doing this now for about 7 years, not only Trans-Siberia but the other journeys that the Golden Eagle train does. I think one thing that is brought home to one as you travel along the Trans-Siberian Railway, if there's one word to describe Russia or the Russians, it's endurance. For centuries they've endured appalling governments, awful weather, bad terrain. Any other country that have the politicians out and hang them from lampposts. The Russians endure. I think that's a main quality, and you see that as we travel along the railway. I think that Russia in general is of tremendous interest to people because, of course, during the Cold War, up until 1990, 1991, as a Westerner, it was very difficult to come to Russia. You could come, but it was very difficult. You were followed. Probably your accommodation was bugged. The bureaucracy was incredible. And now things have opened up, and people can come here. But in any case, I think Trans-Siberian has a sort of romantic image for people, and that I think is why so many people want to do it. And particularly do it in comfort. And we're very fortunate in that we are travelling in considerable comfort. We're eating excellent food, while at the same time being able to see what the country is really like.
The train runs through the Barbara Steppe, a green landscape of open plains and countless aspen trees, before arriving in the modern city of Novosibirsk. The Glavny railway station in central Novosibirsk is Siberia's largest and the most important train station on the Trans-Siberian Railway. A fitting transportation hub for a city that prides itself on being the third largest city in Russia. The huge State Academy Opera and Ballet Theater, even bigger than Moscow's Bolshoi, is not only one of the premier tourist attractions in Novosibirsk, but it's also a hall where many famous national premieres have been staged, and is regarded as one of the best platforms in the world for dramatists to showcase their talents. The Akademgorodok Scientific Center of Siberia, home of the Siberian Academy of Sciences. The Institute of Geology is one of the major departments. It houses an excellent mineralogical museum with examples of Siberian minerals and meteorite fragments. Getting more to the point about trains, the Railway Museum. There are over 100 locomotives and carriages on display here, including trains from the time of the Tsars. The museum has an example of just about every different type of steam, diesel, and electric engine imaginable. While the sundown shines its light over the Glavny railway station, we board the train to proceed on our journey to Irkutsk. Always a happy hour somewhere. Cocktails at your service.
We get the occasional newspaper comes in, and the piano playing by the in-train pianists is very pleasant, most enjoyable, the whole journey so far.
Irkutsk station is coming into sight. The city of Irkutsk has approximately 600,000 inhabitants, which in Russia means it's just a medium-sized town. Nevertheless, it's still the capital of Pribaltia, or East Siberia. We're now about 5,000 kilometers east of Moscow. Irkutsk goes back to the year 1880, when the town experienced a rapid development after gold was discovered.
I have to say this city has been a highlight so far. We've gotten to interact with some locals. We got to see an apartment, the interior of an apartment, which was very interesting. Yes, I've loved the architecture here. It's a very charming city. I can definitely see now why Irkutsk is considered the Paris of the North.
Most of the brick mansions and enormous public buildings date from that period and represent a charming mixture of different architectural styles, alongside beautiful Russian Orthodox churches. The statue of Tsar Alexander III on the Angara Embankment is a copy of the 1904 original and commemorates the only Tsar ever to visit Siberia. A cooking class adventure at the Aneti Cooking Workshop is a must-do and a wonderful introduction to the local Russian cuisine.
I think one of my favorite highlights from there was the cooking class, and my understanding is that's a new addition to the itinerary, and it was an opportunity to create some of Russia's most iconic dishes in a really fun and interactive setting. We had the opportunity to make blinis and vinaigrette salad and shi, which is a soup from Russia, and to make it from scratch and to hear the heritage of these dishes was really adding a new dimension.
The mansion of Decembrist Prince Volkonsky is a small house in a courtyard. It's one of the houses where rebellious aristocracy and army officers from St. Petersburg were banished by Tsar Nicholas. Nowadays, the ideas and atmosphere of those days still live on here. We attend a piano soiree.
They lit candles and turned off the electricity so that we could really feel as if we were taken back in time. It was a special moment for sure.
Summertime is the moment to visit a private dacha. This country house is where we'll meet a local family and enjoy dinner with them, cooked from local produce they've grown themselves. Tonight our train arrives in Sludyanka, the southernmost point of Lake Baikal. In the early morning, the train will continue along the Lake Baikal branch line, pulled by a steam locomotive engine. This section of the original Circumbaikal Railway is the most picturesque part of the Trans-Siberian journey. A breathtaking route where the dawn conjures up a magical image of a landscape. The train stops halfway at Polovina Station, a scenic lakeside spot.
So Lake Baikal has to be a highlight of the itinerary for most, if not all, the passengers.
A steam engine photo stop will be organized here, so keep your camera close at hand. It's also an opportunity to take a closer look at the steam train.
This fantastic light that you get off the lake, the arrival of the steam locomotive, which is a huge moment on the trip, and of course the opportunity to, if you're brave enough, to swim in the waters of the largest freshwater lake in the world is incredible.
Got my swim shorts, absolutely. Don't care how cold it's going to be. I want to say that I took a dip in Lake Baikal, the largest freshwater lake and deepest in the world, with what, 20% of the world's freshwater supply. Why would you not go and take a dip in there?
We depart from Polovina Station and travel onwards to Port Baikal. The natural scenery is breathtaking alongside the lake, and for good reason. At 25 million years of age, Lake Baikal is the oldest as well as the deepest lake on Earth, containing 1/5 of all the fresh water in the world. More than 300 rivers pour their waters into the lake. Lake Baikal has provided relatively stable living conditions for more than half of its 25 million years, with a huge variety of native life forms. Port Baikal, our final destination under steam. Before boarding the ferry to Listvyanka village on the other side of the lake, a short visit to the small museum of the Circumbaikal Railway is well worth the attention. The ferry trip takes only 20 minutes, and on arrival is the starting point for several excursions. the open-air museum of wooden architecture, where a small surprise performance is given. The Lake Baikal Museum and Aquarium, established in 1993, has as its mission the collection, storage, research, and demonstration of material evidence and information related to Lake Baikal and its fauna and flora. Hike up the Chersky Mount for a bird's-eye view of the Lake Baikal area. Up the mountain by feet or chairlift. The 1.5-mile hike is a relatively steep climb, but you're rewarded for your labors with a magnificent view. This long and exciting day will be closed with a well-deserved barbecue feast at a unique location.
We've had some great meals on the train, but that was the first opportunity for us to have an al fresco meal. We had a barbecue on the edge of the lake, cooked by the train's culinary team. Fantastic sunset, cool temperature. It was really perfect.
One of the reasons I'm on the train is to see a country, or the countries that we're going through. You just sit in a car like this and look out the window and watch the different changes in vegetation, the different trees, the different countryside. These are things that you come to these countries to observe. The way the villages are set up, the way people have their houses set up, finding out whether they work in a factory, what kind of car they're driving, find out what the country's really about. Yeah, that's what I like to do. So if I'm not sleeping or eating or conversing with somebody or going to a program, I'm happy to sit right here and watch the world go by.
This morning we stop at ULAN, capital of the Buryat Autonomous Republic. A drive through the city center to the central square, where the main landmark nowadays is a huge head of Vladimir Lenin. Heading for the Old Believers, descendants of the religious dissidents who split from the mainstream Orthodox Church in the 17th century, were exiled to Siberia and have preserved their unique culture since then. Meeting with these people will give a unique insight into the traditions and history of old rural Russia.
So we've had an opportunity to meet the Old Believers, that really epitomizes Siberia. They live in very remote villages. They live a hardy lifestyle, but they welcomed us into their homes very warmly, which I think is quite endearing. And they told us about their heritage and their history, and they really made us feel part of the community, if only for one afternoon.
Reboarding the train in ULAN to continue the journey to the border of Russia and Mongolia. High-rise buildings in sight means we've come to the outskirts of Ulaanbaatar, known as the world's coldest capital city. Ulaanbaatar is the capital as well as the largest city of Mongolia and the cultural, industrial, and financial heart of the country. The parliamentary building on Sukbatat Square is on the central square of Mongolia's capital and dominated by the statue of Damdin Sukbatar, one of the leaders of Mongolia's 1921 revolution. The official name was changed in 2013 in honor of Genghis Khan, considered the founding father of Mongolia. The first museum in Mongolia, which was called the Mongolian National Museum, was established in 1924 and became the basis for other museums, including the National Museum of Mongolian History. The modern National Museum of Mongolian History was established after the merger of historical, archaeological, and ethnographic departments of the State Central Museum and the Museum of the Revolution in 1991. The Winter Palace of the Bogd Khan was built during the period when the city of Ulaanbaatar was first set up as a permanent capital. Today it's a museum of the last monarchy. The complex includes 6 temples, and many of the Bogd Khan's and his wife's possessions are on display in the main building. The only palace that remains in Ulaanbaatar is the Winter Palace. The Gandan Monastery, a Tibetan-style monastery in the Mongolian capital of Ulaanbaatar. It was restored and revitalized in 1990 and features a 26.5-meter-high statue of Midjid Genrezik, a Buddhist bodhisattva. Buddhism was declared Mongolia's national religion in the 13th century and has been widespread since the 1600s. By 1900, there were 583 monasteries and temples, and a trip around some of them can be considered the perfect introduction to the Buddhism not only of Mongolia, but of Tibet as well. Terelj National Park is recognized as a part of the huge Khan Kenti Reserve and was established as a strictly protected area in 1992. Most of the park area is uninhabited and can be entered only by foot or on horseback.
These people have a totally different lifestyle than anything I've seen, than anything you'd see in the United States, or for what I can tell anywhere else. It's just a unique situation. Something that I think you could only do on this trip, on a train. I don't think you can go and see these places the way you see them on the train in any other fashion.
Mongolia's well-known throat singer, Andrei Mongush, produces a fundamental pitch and simultaneously one or more pitches over that. The history of Mongolian throat singing reaches far back in time, and its popularity among Mongolians seems to have arisen as a result of geographic location and culture. Sheep and goat herders were probably the originators of this style, as the open landscape of Mongolia allows for sounds to carry a great distance.
We all want to see the statue of Genghis Khan, which is massive.
Back on board, out of Mongolia from the Trans-Mongolian route, back to the Trans-Siberian. The train crosses a series of mountain ranges and wide valleys. This last part of our journey takes 3 days before we arrive in Vladivostok. A perfect opportunity to meet the staff and crew.
Quality of food has been outstanding. It's a difficult schedule. Got a lot of people to cater to with different tastes. All in all, the food has been out of this world.
Quality of the food has been amazing considering the small space that they have to make it. But not only that, in one of the stops we were able to see them bring on fresh cabbage that they'd gotten from the market, and that was the main dish that evening. So yeah, it's all just a very authentic experience.
So the Trans-Siberian Express, especially the Golden Eagle, I mean, many people talk about the Trans-Siberian Express as being quite a challenging way of navigating between Moscow and Vladivostok, and I think the Golden Eagle aspect of that takes a lot of that hardship out and a lot of that discomfort and still offers the same sense of adventure. And when you compare this to other luxury train trips around the world, you have an opportunity to really settle in. 12 days in a train, you can really settle in, you can get to know your other passengers, you get to know the crew on board, and you get to make the train home much more than you do on other trains. And tomorrow we'll be finishing, and I'll be quite sad to leave.
All good things come to an end. With another skyline in sight, we head to our final destination.
До свидания. Спасибо.
It's a train ride. It's a train ride across Russia, Siberia and Mongolia. How many people, other than maybe folks that live over here and this is not a foreign place to them, how many people wouldn't think that was a unique experience? So I would absolutely and will recommend it to people that I have come across back in Ohio or any place else for that matter.
We nearly took a river cruise instead, and then I thought, no, we have a river cruise on rails. It takes just as long, 15 days, and would be more enjoyable and a dream come true. Really, it's one of those things as a little boy, you know, all the way across Siberia. Fantastic. This sort of journey, anybody would like this. I like trains. It's good.
Welcome to Vladivostok, the eastern terminus of the Trans-Siberian line and home of Russia's Pacific Fleet. As the main naval base of the Soviet Pacific Fleet, the city was closed to foreigners during the Soviet years. After 1990, Vladivostok opened up to the world, and since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the city has become a wide-open window to the east. The heraldic eagle with 2 heads is the official symbol of the Russian Federation and has a dominant spot in the city center. The central square serves as a memorial to the fighters in the Soviet power at the Far East. Enjoy the view of Vladivostok Harbor and the Golden Horn Bay from the Eagle's Nest. The Ruski Bridge is a so-called cable-stayed bridge and connects Ruski Island and the peninsula sections of the city across the eastern Bosphorus Strait. With a central span of 1,104 meters, it's the longest cable-stayed bridge in the world.
This trip was the most unique trip I'd ever seen, and I decided this is something I got to do. This is a part of the world I haven't been to. I want to go to this And the best way to do it is on the Trans-Siberian Railway. It's a memory for a lifetime, no doubt about it.
A traveler's tip: visit Glass Bay Beach, where nature has turned pollution into beauty. Just half an hour drive out of Vladivostok. Waves on Russia's Pacific shoreline crafted and molded old bottles, porcelain, and tiles into a sparkling tourist attraction. On a sunny day, the beach on Ussuri Bay looks as if it's covered with lighted candles. In the past, it was used as a dump for truckloads of unwanted glass bottles and waste from a local porcelain factory, or so the story goes. Years of erosion has broken, then rounded and polished the glass, giving the beach a distinctive quality, to the extent that people pay a small fee to come here and enjoy the sight. The Cruising on Rail team, hosted by the Golden Eagle's Trans-Siberian Express, welcomes you on one of our next voyages of a lifetime.